Hey, Laura.
Hi.
So good to see you. We've actually already been chatting a little bit for anyone listening, but just in case, you guys, this is Laura Durham, and I'm so excited to talk to her today about the Annabelle Archer Wedding Planner series. Yay.
Hi. Good to be
So,
here.
Laura, before we start, I saw something. I'm going to read your bio in a second, but I saw something today. I was doing some research on your background that it like stopped me in my tracks. And I'm going to read this from this piece of paper to make sure I'm not saying it incorrectly. I read that you were Washington, D.C.'s top wedding planner for the past 3 years. Is that current? Like, are you still doing this?
No, I actually did it for 25 years and I was named the top wedding planner for 10 years.
That is 10 in
Yeah,
DC, no less.
DC. Yeah. So
And
I did
you've
it for
done
20.
some weddings, like some big weddings.
I have done some big weddings and some big names. But one thing about DC is you don't really talk about the names.
Right, right. I'm not gonna ask you to name names, but I'm gonna ask for a few details. But first, let me read your bio and I'll just rather than looking at a piece of paper, I have it right here. Everybody listening, Laura Durham is the Agatha Award winning author of the Annabelle Archer Wedding Planner Mystery Series. Like her protagonist, she worked as a wedding planner in DC, as we just discussed. But unlike Annabelle, fortunately, she never came across any dead bodies at her weddings. Laura now lives in North Carolina with her husband, whom she met in the wedding business. Okay, so there's some juicy gossip there. Two children. She has two children, two cats, and one dog. And if she didn't love writing so much, she would be the female version of Indiana Jones, as would I, or she would work on the Starship Enterprise. She says it's a toss up.
It
I
is.
am obsessed with Indiana Jones. Like I would be all over that.
Oh,
No
for sure.
starships for me. I'm afraid to fly.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to? And I would envision myself like hanging out with Harrison Ford, at least the young.
Oh my God. Yeah. Younger Harrison Ford. And well, even still now, I'm so excited that there is going to be another Indiana Jones. I heard it got delayed. I think he hurt himself or something. And so they delayed it for a while. But there is going to be another one, and that's just awesome. Every time one comes out, I use it as an opportunity to rewatch the whole series. But
It's a
I
great series.
digress.
It is great. And
This
my
is about
husband
you,
actually,
not
as a
Harrison. Okay.
photographer, my
What?
husband actually met him at an event.
What?
And he gets to meet all these people because he's a photographer. And so he photographs a lot of charity events as well, and galas and in DC and political things. So he'll come back and be like, oh yes, I got to hang out with Harrison Ford. I was like, what?
I would have fainted.
Yeah. And so, it was in a green room and apparently like no one else was talking to him. And he's like, so I actually felt bad. So he's like, I went up and we had a nice conversation. And it's like, I cannot believe this. But yeah, he said he was a great, wonderful, friendly guy.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. But going back to your wedding planner and
Yes.
DC thing, so, and again, no names, obviously, but I mean, were there like, what are some of the personalities or incidents or whatever that really stand out to you when you think back on 25 years?
25 years. I mean, they're definitely like we did weddings of actual, movie stars, professional athletes, senators, congressmen, senators' wives, sitting Supreme Court justices, like the whole the whole gamut.
That's really cool.
And I got used to having bomb sniffing dogs at weddings. I got used to Secret Service, hanging out. I did a wedding, probably the most stressful was one where a sitting president was in attendance. And the level of security for
Oh,
that it was off the charts. And it was just insane because the number of Secret Service, and it was in Georgetown, which is, charming and small with small streets. So the number, all of a sudden the entire press pool comes and the guys in the SUVs with the machine guns, and it just all happens. And they, just like descend on this sweet little church where we have the bridesmaids standing out. And
this is like the perfect fodder for a mystery series. Were you writing Annabelle while you were in this business, or was it something that you were thinking about as you were working the job?
I actually was inspired pretty early on by, and I always say a caveat, like 99.9% of my mothers of the bride were wonderful and I love them. But there was one early on who was so awful that
I'm
I
already excited.
I
What did
obsessed,
she
you know,
do?
it's the kind of thing where she was just so horrible. And again, most of my mothers of the bride are lovely, but I started fantasizing about like, you know, like her dying a horrible death. And I was like, you know what? I need to get this out of my system. And so I wrote the scene where she died, which sounds macabre, but and I felt so much better. And I thought, you know what? This could make an interesting book. And that's literally how it started.
That is
So, yeah.
great. Great. Like, so is there a mother of the bride version of Bridezilla, like the term? And do they just call them like mother of the bridezilla?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of
There needs to be one.
yeah, and we have groomzillas, like groomzilla is a thing.
Really?
Yeah. They're not as
They're
frequent,
super
but they're
controlling
bad.
about the events.
Yeah, or just like, you know, especially I used to say we had a lot of lawyers. And so when the grooms wanted to really flex their law muscles and, you know, rip apart the contracts and make, and, you know, be like, oh, bless their hearts, you know, here we go
Nice.
again.
Also, you're in DC too, so there's a lot of lawyers I'm sure you're dealing with, and
A
you
lot.
know, but was there ever one? I mean, I can't even, my husband was so, you know, I adore him, but yes, weddings were not his forte, as is true of most men. Did you ever have any men that were super picky about, like, I don't know, the flowers, the details? Like,
We did. And I would always tell the bride, I was like, be careful what you wish for. Do not ask for opinions and then get upset when you get them really strongly. And that would happen. They would insist that the groom go to the floral and then he would, you know, have strong opinions. I was like, I told you. I told
yeah,
you. I told
yeah, there's no way I would let my husband
you.
know.
Right. Usually the guys were in charge of the music or certain things, or they would be very interested in the cake tasting. That's a popular thing, but not every guy was super, super involved, which is okay.
So yeah, I wouldn't want that. I mean, I would feel like it's one thing to deal with the bride, but then also to have the groom really involved, it would be a little too stressful in on a number of levels. But did you, so okay, so I know the first one was based on a mother of the bridezilla, as we'll call her. Are you still able after all the, I mean, how many books do you currently have in the series? There are quite a few.
There's 17.
That is so awesome. Um, do you still currently draw from real life experiences to write these books?
I do. I mean, luckily I have a lot of stories and I apologize in the background. You hear my dog.
I know I have dogs too, and I'm just hoping they don't bark during the
Right. And he's been quiet up until now. My
night.
husband is out of town. So of course and the dog is like his like BFF. So the
Yes.
dog's sitting here probably feeling sorry for himself that he's stuck with me. Can you hear that? That is so embarrassing. You're gonna have
That
to
is adorable.
be. You're gonna have to be. And his little ears are down, like poor me. Poor
He's
little
also,
thing.
I think he just really wants to participate in the interview.
He probably does. And he's not small enough to pick up and say hello. He's about 60 pounds.
Oh yeah, no, leave him there. What's his name?
And his aloha.
Aloha. How
Yeah.
sweet.
Aloha. You're gonna have to be quiet. Yeah. So I do have a little dog I put in the books at around maybe the third or fourth book, a Yorkie. And he is the dog of of the caterer. And he basically, the caterer carries him around in a man bag.
Okay, so
And
Richard's dog, right?
Richard's dog.
Okay. All right.
And it is inspired by the real life caterer friend of mine who was never into children or dogs. Like they were just too messy. They were just imperfect and a big mess, and he didn't like it. And then all of a sudden, he inherited this cute little dog. And
Oh.
yeah, can you see this ridiculousness? He inherited this dog and became kind of silly over him. And I was like, this is perfect. So, in a way, like the real life does still inspire the books. The characters are based a lot on people I worked with. They're exaggerated, of course, but real caterers, real florists. My motorcycle kind of Christian biker florist were inspired by a couple of florists I worked with who wore all leather and were about 350 pounds. And had piercings, and did not look at all like florists,
That is
which I thought was
not,
perfect.
yeah, that
Right?
is not what I would imagine.
No, you don't, which I think is the fun thing. It's like you expect certain things in the wedding industry, but then you get surprised because people are not always what you think they're going to be. But I
Did
do
you,
draw on, like, there's so many stories from so many years that it doesn't take long just to think of one thing and just,
and
you
then
know,
to go from there. Um, did you ever have to work with like a florist or a caterer, or I'm sure you did, or photographer that just completely flaked out on you or at the last minute, or was there ever any big, I'm always in it for like the crisis
oh, right.
scenario. What was like the biggest
Okay.
crisis you can remember where you were just
I
like, how am I going to solve this?
I had a wedding on a client's super yacht. And it was, one of these where it had a
What a
helicopter pad.
horrible job, Laura.
I know it was arduous. But the problem was it rained. So the ceremony was supposed to be in the top on the helicopter thing. We were covering the hot tubs. It was gonna be beautiful. It rained. It was more than it had in 100 years in DC. All day, all night. Like, it kept going. And the boat kept rising at the dock. And we
Oh
had
no.
catering tents on the dock for the caterers, and the ramps were rising. So as the boat would rise, the dock was stationary and the ramps were like a slide. So the waiters were zipping down these metal with these tiny little like ropes for handles. We were all drenched. We were soaked. We had people on the top trying to make sure that the electricity didn't go out, and it's lightning. And I was like, someone's gonna die. Someone's
I
gonna go
would,
over the edge.
yeah. I
Someone's
mean,
gonna be
that could have
electrocuted.
been your first real death at a
It could
at
have
a
been.
wedding.
Yes, and I think the book that I wrote about it is called Death on the Aisle, and
I was
it's
going to ask you if you
yeah,
did that.
I did, because it was so crazy and so over the top, because the boat had also been, refitted for the wedding, so recarpeted, they'd put it in dry dock so it could be done, so it would all match, and it just was 150 guests in just flown in from all over the world, and it was a monsoon.
What were they able to fit them? I mean, it's a super yacht. Were they able to just fit them inside, I guess?
We did. At the last minute, we were able to tent the back, which we saw the weather report, and so we tented the very back transom. So we were able to cover that and fit more people. But I mean, the guests they had a great time. It was almost like they were watching this beautiful show outside. It was the staff that was just
It was freaking out.
cringe. And
Yeah.
there are still people who talk about that wedding. Like, I will
Yeah,
see
I
a
think,
waiter 15 years later, and they'll still mention that wedding.
I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I think it seems like the unexpected events at weddings can often be the things that people most fondly remember. And I wonder if it's because there's sort of a spirit of everybody pulling together to make that wedding, happen. You know what I mean? Like,
Definitely when it
best
comes to
of a,
staff. Like, we remember the ones that were the craziest ones, because you did have to really it's like being in the trenches, with these people. And the wedding world is a strange world, because you work on the weekends. Your work starts to gear up on Fridays. That's when you start to work. And then during the week, you slow down. So you have this reverse life. For years, I never went to a party on a Saturday. Like, I didn't go to friends. So all of my friends ended up being in the wedding industry, because we had these reverse lives. And you zip into people's lives, you're in their lives intimately for about a year, and then you're gone. And so it's a very strange existence.
But it seems like, I mean, you wouldn't need to go to any parties because you were always throwing the best parties in DC from the sound of things. I mean,
Right.
super yachts, come on.
It did kind of make it to the point where, if in being invited to a wedding, I was like, if I'm not getting a big check, I'm just kind of not sure why I'm going.
Yeah, like, why am I even at this party if I'm not getting paid?
And I was so used to, going to the back of the house in hotels, that if I went to a hotel as a guest, I would kind of instinctively and I would go, oh, I'm not supposed to go there. I'm not supposed to go into the back.
Oh yeah, I'm not allowed.
Right, I'm not supposed to. But, it's just a habit of the way you kind of exist in this other world.
Well, what made you decide to leave? Did you start writing the series? And then, I mean, because you won a really big award right off the bat with this first book, but it sounds like had you left the industry when you wrote it, or were you writing about the mother of the bridezilla
I
As
was
you were like,
still I was still fully into it. And I actually took a pen name because I wasn't sure how my brides would react to me
yeah,
writing the, killing off their
yeah.
mothers. So I did have this pen name, but it didn't take long for people to find out. But the reaction was actually not what I expected. All of a sudden, these brides were just so solicitous. And they would all of a sudden the messages I would get would be like, call me back whenever you get a chance, no rush.
They
And I
wanted,
realized
yeah.
they were terrified. They were
I
afraid
know
if they
why.
misbehaved, I was going to put them in a book. And I
I
was like,
know
I should
why.
have done
Yeah,
this years ago.
I was gonna guess that,
Yeah.
or I bet you had some who wanted to be in the book.
Yes, some definitely did. Or they would ask if I was going to put them in a book, and the answer is only if you misbehave, really. So I'm only looking for the
That is
crazy and the wild and
that
the
is the
outrageous.
best tool in your wedding planner toolbox. You're right. You should have started it from
Years
the
ago.
get-go.
Right. But I did plan them for, I like it coexisted for probably 10 years. I was still doing weddings and writing.
Is there something that, I mean, did your writing career, I'm sure at that point you were just so like you were so established at that point that you didn't really need to do the weddings anymore, or did the stress just finally?
It was a combination. I mean, 25 years is a lot of brides.
Yeah.
I got to the point where
It sure
I was
is.
like, I've seen everything.
That's a lot of stress.
It's a lot of stress. And it is a very stressful, especially when you get higher and higher, when you're dealing with that level of money, when people are dropping $1 million in one day, there's no room for mistakes. So it is a high pressure. People expect perfection. And so at a certain point, you kind of go, gosh, and I had two kids and, at various points they were, babies and juggling it. It got to be a lot. And I'd done my duty.
Were you like, I mean, were you high tech like J-Lo in the wedding planner where you had like a walkie talkie and you had like
Oh yeah, no, no. And some of the wedding movies are funny because in that movie, especially when they say, "Oh, it's the cardinal sin of the wedding planner," and I was actually at a screening for that movie with a bunch of wedding planners, and you could see we all kind of leaned forward, like, "What is this cardinal
that's
rule?"
so cool.
And it said like, "Oh, never fall in love with the groom," and I was like, "That has never even remotely come close to happening to me." Like that is not something that
Oh my
any of my
God.
colleagues have thought.
That is so cool. I had no idea when I said that you were associated with that movie in any
Well, they
way.
just did a screening. They just did a screening and they invited a bunch of wedding planners in DC. And so it was a big kind of
That
thing
is
for us.
so neat. I
It
did
was
not
fun,
know that.
but it really was not that realistic. And we didn't wear walkie-talkies only because that would be more obtrusive. Like we really tried to blend. Our thing was to
Yeah.
like we wore, black dresses but we kind of for DC, you wear black at a wedding and you fit right in. So we just tried to blend in and look like just very attentive guests.
So like kind of, I mean, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you would want to, although I'm thinking of brides that might want to be able to find you in a room at any point, like at any point
Oh,
during, did
oh,
you
they could
have,
find me. We were never the way we split it up, I had a team. And so there was always someone literally within arm's reach of a bride at all times. So there was never a time when she
that
could
is so
walk
cool.
around and not be attended to.
So in your series, what do you envision for the future for Annabelle? Like I'm assuming you're still going to keep it going, or do you, I don't know, have you thought about that at all?
Well, it is kind of coming to a little bit at some point we're about, so I think the next book is going to be called Day of the Wed, and it's going to be set in Mexico. And it's all because it's a cozy, it's all
Great,
puns.
that's
So
great.
it's just half my job is thinking of wedding related puns.
That is a great title.
And that is, as the characters are developing, there, the Annabelle meets the detective in the first book, and then eventually, there's a romance in it, but it's a slow burn, like cozies are. So, but now we're reaching a point where, she's married and these things are happening. So eventually it's going to kind of get it to a nice wrapping up point. And then I'll be moving on to a different series.
Can you give us any hints about that?
The new series is actually going to be historical. So it's a little less slapstick and a little more, not serious, but well, a little more serious. Set in World War II.
I was just about to ask the era. So would it involve a wedding planner, or are you going to do something entirely
Yeah.
different?
It involves a female code breaker in Washington, D.C.
Oh my gosh, that
Yeah.
is fascinating.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. So, I mean, were there code girls, or what's the little bit, can you give us a little bit of backstory on that?
Sure. So there were thousands actually of female code breakers that were brought in during World War II to DC. They were recruited from all over the country, and because the boys were being shipped off to war and being shipped off to fight and active, the women were the ones that were pulled in, and they were pulled from schools. A lot they were either school teachers, they were at universities, and they were good at crossword puzzles. They were good at math. They were good at different things, and they were able to target these women, and they sent recruiters out all over looking for them, and they would set up tests, and the girls would come in and they would take these tests, and then they brought them in. They lived kind of in, most of them lived in Virginia in a place called Girls Town, basically dorms for all these codebreaker women. And they just literally, they're responsible for breaking some of the codes that shortened the war. It was amazing. Like they did so much, and they never spoke of it because of soon after the war was over, all the men returned and they were sent back to wherever. But it was really an incredible period of history.
Kind of like Rosie the Riveter in the factories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where
Exactly.
women, played these extraordinary roles, and for the time, and then nothing. That was, they all went home.
They all went home. Right.
So do you see that as being in any way cozy, or is it going to like a cozy historical, or is it just going to be straight up historical?
I mean, it will be cozy in the sense that I don't ever really write
Right.
graphic, or it won't be thriller or anything too intense, but it probably will be a little less humorous than the Annabelle. The Annabelle is
Yeah.
Kind of crazy
It
and
lends
over the
itself,
top.
it lends itself to humor, obviously.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry, my dogs are going crazy. These COVID experiences, you guys, I'm sure everybody who's listening has had this, but my apologies. I've got a pack of mongrels in there.
And the funny thing is, if mine hears it, he'll come in here and wonder where they are. Sometimes he barks at the TV.
Do you hear them? Like I'm like, what's going on in my living room? So do you read any historicals or other cozies? Tell us.
I do. I love reading historical mystery is one of my favorite genres. I devour it. So, and I love like Sarah Rosette's, our friend Sarah's historicals. I love them. I do. I kind of, especially because I think of the pandemic even more, I either wanted to go into the past or I wanted to go into the future. Like I didn't want to read much that was dwelling on what was going on. Like I really wanted to be transported.
Yeah, I needed to escape. For me, interestingly, it was sort of travel cozies that I sort of wandered off into reading. But that makes perfect sense. Do you ever read any Reese Bowen or?
Yes, she's wonderful.
She is wonderful. And then do you read straight up cozy?
I do. And I read, speaking of travel cozy, do you read Maddie Hunter?
Everybody has recommended her to me and I haven't yet.
She is wonderful. And she's one of the ones that I read. So I definitely read straight cozy, but interspersed. So it's like historical straight cozy, some thrillers. I kind of mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to sort of read different things. Well, before I ask you where readers can find you, I want to know the story behind the story really quickly on Wed On Arrival, because that is the book that you are so graciously giving away this month for the Cozy Mystery Book Club. So was that based on a true wedding experience or?
It is not. So it's a prequel. So what I did is I kind of wrote a novella that is the first wedding that Annabelle Archer does in DC. And it's where she, first meets some of the characters that she will then be with in all these books. And And it's the first wedding she does with Richard. And it is actually not based at all on the first wedding I ever did, which is a good thing because the first wedding I ever did was a colossal, unbelievable disaster. Just it was the craziest thing I've ever actually done.
What do you mean a colossal disaster? What
it was right. So when we started, I had a business partner at the time. We were 24 years old. I always say that we had more guts than brains because we didn't know that much about what we were doing, but we were 24 and we had a lot of energy and we just thought that we could do anything.
As one does at 24.
How hard could wedding planning be? Literally is what we said. We're like, how hard could it be? And we just planned her wedding. We're like a piece of cake. So we got this first wedding and it ended up being at this park. And there was this horrible traffic accident on the highway. So no one could get there.
No.
Everyone was late. The bride was late. The DJ had a fish tie on back in the day. I don't know if you remember in the 80s and 90s, those fish ties.
I remember.
Yes. So he was wearing a fish tie. So we were, horrified. We're like, oh, this guy's got a fish tie. He had the generator that powered everything, including the cake, which had this little fountain in the middle that did colored water.
That sounds cool, actually.
It was very, and but the cake had these down the big staircases, but the wait staff couldn't get there. The guests couldn't get there. The bride couldn't get there. Everything was hard, so it just was just one thing after another. So I ended up cutting the cake for them, serving it, popping the champagne. I drew the line at being in the bouquet toss, Kat. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm sorry, they don't have enough people. I'm not doing that. But it was just one thing after another. And we were the whole time, these two 24-year-old newbie wedding planners were trying to fix everything. And at the end, we were just shell shocked. And we said, it has to go up from here. It can't get any worse. There can never be a wedding more catastrophic than this one. So it's only upward. And it did only go upward. So.
Well, I love it when you're well into a series and suddenly the author releases that prequel, because you're so attached to the characters at that point and so many things about them, and you probably in your mind have wondered, at least I do, how did they meet? So that's really neat. So were these characters from Annabelle, are any of them based on that initial wedding, or are they your team?
They are not. They aren't based on that, but they are based on. So the real Richard was a caterer. He was the first caterer who thought we were worth working with when we were 24.
So cool.
Gave us a chance, and so he did give us a chance, which is kind of what in the book, in the prequel, he gives her a chance and brings her onto this wedding. So that was true. And the real Richard and I are still very good friends. And we've ended up traveling all over the world together, going on adventures.
Oh, that is awesome. So he knows. Yeah. So then he knows. I was just going to ask you, does he know, this caterer know that you used him? Obviously he does.
Oh, yes. And he's thrilled with it. Although every once in a while he'll call me and he'll say, all right, darling, you're exaggerating me a little bit. I'm like, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm a writer.
No, right? I mean,
right. But yes, so most
fabulous.
And, and anyone else, the assistant character is actually a compilation of a bunch of assistants I've had over the years. So I pick little bits from different personalities and kind of made them into one person.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of, and when people from the DC wedding industry read the books, they actually love the fact that they can pick up on places and references to certain vendors. And so it has a lot of Easter eggs.
And I'm sure some of them have even seen themselves in the book, quite possibly.
They might have.
So, okay, I know I said we were going to talk about where readers can find you, but one thing that I didn't do, give us a couple of fun facts about yourself before we leave the readers with your contact info.
Oh, fun facts. Let's see.
Anything anyone would not expect from you as a wedding planner.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's see. What would they not expect as a wedding planner? I love to paddleboard. I do a lot of stand-up paddleboarding.
Not expect that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although talk about training for a crisis, staying calm and poised, and
There you go.
that
Exactly.
would teach, yeah, that make, okay, so that does make a certain amount of sense, but still, that's adventurous.
Well,
I
it's
don't want to
fun.
get wet.
And the and actually talking about the calm in a storm. So one of the characters in the book is modeled after my friend Monty Durham, who's actually the one of the stars of Say Yes to the Dress Atlanta. So and we worked for years together in DC. He's a hairdresser before he went on Say Yes to the Dress.
I
And
love, so can I say, I love him.
oh,
That's the whole reason I actually, so I watch, full disclosure, I started with Say Yes to the Dress, but I like Atlanta so much more because I love that Southern sass that they bring to that show. And of course, he's the biggest part of that, really, in my opinion. But anyway, fabulous guy.
And I have to, the joke is that I have to actually tone him down in the books because I tell him, I was like, I can't put the way you talk into these books. They will not, like, especially when I was with the publisher, like my first, I was like, I can't put, because he can be so hilariously raunchy.
Yeah, I can imagine that, and just I love like his like Southern kind of catty, like he does so well. Laura, you have had the most interesting life, like that just, and then to top it off, like being a writer, it's just so, I don't know, it's so exciting for me. And I'm sure for everyone watching. Where can people find out more about you?
Sure. I'm at lauradurham.com and I'm also on Facebook, and I think it is Laura Durham author. I think that's it. But if you, anywhere, it's just Laura Durham, lauradurham.com or Laura Durham on Facebook.
And can they sign up for a newsletter if they have one on your website?
They can. And on the website, they can also get a free short story if they sign up. And it's not part of it. You can't get it anywhere but for signing up. So if you sign up, you can get that story, and it's exclusive to the newsletter.
Everybody go there. That's a deal. Thanks, Laura. It has been so much fun talking to you. And I'm living vicariously through your stories now. That's just, it's so exciting.
Well, I'll tell Monty you say hi.
Please do. Say Tracy in Texas thinks he makes the show and he is why she watches. True story. I'm not even exaggerating that.
He will love that. He will love that.
I love him. Thanks again, Laura. I really appreciate it. Keep writing.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.